an urban legend featuring one of America's greatest fast food icons. And then we take a look at a mysterious hole in Bulgaria. Does this cavernous tunnel actually lead us to the first human being? Today on Dead Rabbit Radio. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Dead Rabbit Radio. I'm your host, Jason Carpenter. I'm having a great day. I hope you guys are having a great day too, but they're jackhammering outside of this apartment right now. I'm staying at my mom's house. I'm on vacation, and I don't know if it's coming across on the recording. It looks like it is based on the sound waves, but we're just going to have to go with it because I have a family event tonight. I can't record an episode later tonight, so we're just going to have to do this. If it sounds too bad, I'll delete it. But let's go ahead and get started here. So the first story I want to talk about is, it's funny because I thought about breaking it up into two segments, and I was like, no, you can talk about it all. So the first story we're going to talk about, hop on board the Carpenter copter. No jackhammers allowed. Leave those. Leave it. Construction worker who's listening to this podcast, put it down. We're going to hop on board the Carpenter copter. We are going to a random KFC somewhere in America. The decade is the 60s. We're in the 1960s. We're sitting in a KFC. Now, there had been a story going around among employees at Kentucky Fried Chickens that there's been a man dressed up in a Colonel Sanders suit. An old man in a Colonel Sanders suit has been stopping by Kentucky Fried Chickens and flipping out. And, you got all these teenagers working at these Kentucky Fried Chickens, and they're like, I don't know if that's true. But it had been going through the grapevine that a man had been dressed up as Colonel Sanders. For people who don't know who Colonel Sanders is, he's an old man, he wears a white... Colonel Sanders is actually, the actual human being is quite fascinating guy. I had to do a bunch of research on him for this segment. He started work at the age of 13. He lied about his age to get into the military. One of those type of guys. He ended up, he got a job at a train company, beat a guy up on the train, got fired from the train company, decided to get his law degree, gets his law degree, fights his own client... gets kicked out, gets disbarred from being a lawyer. Couldn't find more information on that. As fascinating as that segment sounds, he had all of these failure. He'd have this success and then a failure. His success and a failure all throughout his life. He finally started working at a gas station that had a restaurant attached to it. He started making chicken, and it was super popular. And what happened was he started to open up other businesses, and then he thought, you know what? I'm going to be smart about this. I'm going to franchise my idea, and I'm going to make 4 cents per piece of chicken that's sold. So his gravy recipe, his chicken recipe, his corn cob recipe, all of that stuff, he began to franchise out, made tons of money doing it, and then sold the company for $2 million or something like that later on. Oh, and actually I should say this. Part of the reason why he succeeded in business was because one of his employees got murdered by a rival restaurant. Him and an employee had a shootout with a rival restaurant and their employee, and the owner of the other restaurant shot Colonel Sanders' employee. It's a totally true story. And he died, so his rival went to prison, and then Colonel Sanders, and he's not a real colonel, it's like a Kentucky colonel, which is like an honorary thing, but his rival goes to prison, so then he dominated the local food area, he dominated the local food market, and then people had nowhere to go in the area but for his chicken, and it just kind of blew up from there. So murder, intrigue, failure, and success, the whole story of Colonel Sanders is there. But anyways, he sold the company. And he always had that trademark white suit, little goatee and stuff like that. He started, later in life, he wouldn't even leave the house without that suit. And you had to address him as Colonel, by the way. So everyone kind of knows what Colonel Sanders looked like. You can just look at the silhouette or the icon and go, oh, that's Colonel Sanders, right? But there was a man dressed up in a Colonel Sanders suit in the 60s and the 70s, walking into Kentucky Fried Chicken and just being like, I'd like a 2-piece of the chicken and some gravy and a corn on the cob, please. Thank you, ma'am. And then he would get his meal, and he'd walk down, and he'd sit at his table, and he would take a bite of chicken and be like, this is crap! This is crap! And I'm actually churching it up, because he was cussing non-stop. He's like, this is garbage, man! Throwing the gravy. He's like, this is like eating wallpaper. Pfft, this is disgusting. And he would just tear ass through the Kentucky Fried Chicken, knocking over all their stuff, and he would leave. And the kids who worked there would be like, what in the world just happened? How is this? Who was that guy? And then across town, a couple weeks later, guy in a Colonel Sanders suit will walk into a Kentucky Fried Chicken. I'd like the 2-piece of chicken wings, ma'am. And my accent changed a bit, but that's because I'm so hungry. Some gravy, please. And they're like, He'd sit down, he'd start eating it. Do the same thing. Flip out. Cuss everyone out in the store, storm out. People started saying, hey man, you gotta be on the lookout for this guy dressed up as Colonel Sanders. It gets to corporate office and they go, oh, no, we're totally aware of that dude. He's actually the Colonel Sanders. Colonel Sanders, after he sold the company, years later they started changing the recipes to his stuff. The food that he'd labored over so long for. The food that got an employee of his shot in front of him. He said they started using tap water for the gravy. The gravy was the pride. He used to say the gravy was so good you could eat it with no chicken. You could just spoon it in your mouth. And then they started making all these cost-cutting things. So he would go into basically his own restaurant that had pictures of himself on the restaurant and say the food was trash and throw it at people and then storm out. So they couldn't really kick him out. It would be really bad for the brand. But it was known within the company that if a guy came in a Colonel Sanders suit, started just destroying the place, just let it be because that's the real Colonel Sanders, and it's not worth the publicity to find out that the man who invented your restaurant hates it now. But you know what? Actually, here we go. I have another Colonel Sanders story that involves a ghost. Oh, is it a ghost? Maybe a ghost. But we're going to save that for tomorrow. We're actually going to do a 2-parter on Colonel Sanders. We're starting off with the Colonel Sanders urban legend. Was Colonel Sanders destroying KFC restaurants in the 60s and 70s? That's true. Tomorrow you will find out about the curse of Colonel Sanders. And I will say this, since I investigated the curse of Colonel Sanders, every single night I get a mysterious Google update on my phone. But we'll talk about that tomorrow. 2-parter on Colonel Sanders. I bet you didn't expect that when you turned on Dead Rabbit Radio. Let's move on to our next story. Now, our next story is actually a request. It was a request from Corpse Glitch via Gmail. Now, Corpse Glitch, I'm still going through my emails. If you sent me a request like months ago, it's still in the docket. So don't think, oh, sometimes the request turnaround is super fast. Sometimes it takes a little bit while. It really depends on what time of day you catch me. But Corpse Glitch sent me this request via Gmail. So thank you, Corpse Glitch. So the topic is this. We're going to be looking at, and I'm going to mispronounce this, and sorry guys, the Tsarichina Hole. So let's hop it back on board the Carpenter copter. We got some KFC to go. We got the big buck. I haven't eaten KFC for so long. I do like their gravy, though. And I've never had his traditional gravy, so I'm wondering how good that stuff was. But like gravy, mashed potatoes, and their chicken's good, but I prefer like chicken strips. So we got a bunch of chicken strips. Oh, dude, honey barbecue chicken strips, bro. We got honey barbecue chicken strips. And we're flying around. Now, my fingers are all greasy, and the controls, to be fair, I don't have my pilot's license. I guess I should have told you that 263 episodes ago. But we're flying around in the Carpenter copter. Fingers are sticky, but they're finger licking good. I'm actually licking the controls of the helicopter. And you're like, Jason, just fly to the next story. So, that's a plane. Now they're hammering outside of my apartment. Oh, it's beautiful. We're flying over to Tsarichina Hole. Now, Tsarichina Hole is a little interesting place. It's interesting whether or not the other stuff is true. The history of the hole itself is fascinating. So, Tsarichina Hole, we land in the middle of Bulgaria. We jump off the Carpenter copter, and we are in Tsarichina, which is a village in western Bulgaria. And so what happens is, you know what's funny is that okay, so let me just tell you the story and then we'll start dissecting it. Because sometimes when I take notes, I don't realize the flaws in the story, but then once I start talking about it, I'm like, what? That doesn't make sense. Tsarichina Hole is in western Bulgaria. It's by the village of Tsarichina. So what happened was, back in 1990, the Ministry of Defense for Bulgaria said, we want to excavate, we believe that in this hill or piece of ground, piece of earth, there is the lost treasure of King Samuel. Samuel. So King Samuel was a great Bulgarian warlord. Which I mean, like, what do they have? 2 of them? Anyways, I mean, it's not like not like Bulgaria made their mark on the history of Europe. How many warlords did Bulgaria have? Anyways, they had them and Count Dracula. Right? I don't know if I have any subscribers in Bulgaria, and if I do, I apologize. But if I don't, we can all laugh at their country. But if I do, I apologize. So anyways, King Samuel was this great Bulgarian warlord. And he did a bunch of stuff. He was like conquering stuff and da-da-da-da-da. So anyways, that stuff's not that interesting. Because in 1014, he was crushed. He was destroyed at the Battle of Kleidion. Now, it's funny because this story I'm about to tell you, I heard as a kid and it absolutely terrified me. And I'm going to tell you, 100% true, I'm going to tell you this story. It's going to terrify you too. So King Samuel was fighting some more powerful enemy. And he was successful a couple times, but as wars go on, you're going to be suffer defeat here and there. Anyways, the Battle of Kleidion, it was this totally, I read all about it, but I'm not going to bore you with the details. A bunch of people stabbing each other, a bunch of catapults and stuff like that. I don't know if they had catapults, but anyways, it was a medieval warfare, which is cool. This isn't a medieval warfare podcast, so I'm going to spare you all the details. The detail I am going to tell you is the scary part. So his soldiers lose the battle. And 15,000 of his men are captured. So they're like, I give up. Stronger enemy from any other country around Bulgaria. That could have been Estonia for all I know. But anyways, the point is Bulgaria loses. They surrender. 15,000 men are captured, right? This rival country, they take their 15,000 soldiers and they put them in groups of 100. My dad told me this story as a kid. They took 15,000 troops. They divided them up into groups of 100. And they would go into this group and they would take one guy out and stab him in one eyeball. Oh, my eye. Oh, my God. I am so unlucky. How did I get picked 1 out of 100 to get my eye stabbed out? But as you were sitting there holding, I should have made you pick a number between 1 and 100. As you're sitting there holding your one eye that's just been stabbed out, you notice that the 99 other people in your group are having both eyes stabbed out. Blip, 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 just stabbing eyeballs. And what it was the enemy general said, the one guy with one eye can lead the other 99 guys back home. So I'm going to blind 99 people, and I'm going to leave one person with one eye. And I'm going to do that, what is that, 1,500 times? Because there was 15,000 soldiers total, and then they got to, like, do this daisy chain. Now, their home was over a mountain range. It wasn't like a mile walk back to the kingdom. You had one guy with one eye leading 99 guys with no eyes over mountain ranges. And you just had masses of people. So if you happen to stop holding the hand of the person in front of you, you're kind of boned. And if you're in the middle of that chain, the 49 people behind you are also boned. There's no way they're making it home. They end up, the remnants of the army, whoever actually makes it over, gets back to the kingdom, and King Samuel sees it, and he's so freaked out by what happened to these men, he has a heart attack, and he dies. And that was the end of the great Bulgarian warlord, King Samuel. But the myth, so I find that story very fascinating and terrifying as well. But have a happy time sleeping tonight. The myth is that he had some gold, or some treasure, I guess, to be more specific. He had some treasure buried in Tsarichina. He had some gold. He had some treasure buried in Tsarichina. And so the Bulgarian Ministry of Defense said, let's find that treasure, which makes me think that their Ministry of Defense needed something to do on a Tuesday. Because that's really not what the Ministry of Defense should be up to. They shouldn't be on Goonies-style treasure hunts. They should be, like administering defense for their country. But they weren't. They were all doing the truffle shuffle, and they went down to this place to dig up this gold. So they started that in 1990. In 1992, 2 years later, they said, there's nothing down there. Total waste of money. They started excavating with equipment, but eventually the excavators couldn't go any deeper, so you had soldiers using pickaxes and shovels. And after 2 years, they said, that's not worth it. We're not going to find any gold. We've been doing it for 2 years. Nothing down here. So they came back up and they sealed the hole shut with concrete. And that was it. Now, I think that part of the story is true. Could be all made up, but let's assume that part of the story is true, at least. So that's the end of the story of Tsarichina. Or is it? Because this is where we start to get into the myth of this, and this is really what Corpse Glitch was getting at. And nobody cares just about a bunch of military people digging a hole and then quitting. This is the conspiracy theory. They end up making the hole 590 feet long. Okay? It's a long hole. Apparently, the Ministry of Defense had actually had 3 remote viewers also working on the project. Which again sounds like something stupid a government would do, because remote viewing is, for the most part, a waste of time and money. I believe there are some people out there who can do it, but the chances of you rounding up 3 of them is highly unlikely. I'll do an episode on remote viewing in the future. It's one of those things that I'm like, yeah, it probably could work, but there's probably no more than 5 people on the planet who could do it at any given time. So I think probably maybe one of them was real and the other 2 were just pretending. They're like, I see dirt and I see a dark hole in your future. And they're like, whoa, man, you're amazing. He's like, I see a rock in front of you. And they're like, whoa, yeah, I was digging and there was a rock there. Who would have known? Except for a remote viewer. Anyway, so they're digging this tunnel, and apparently they come across a tunnel they didn't dig. So they're digging one tunnel and it breaks into another tunnel that's a long spiral-shaped tunnel. So I don't know if it's like a spiral staircase going down or if the tunnel itself is spirally. Again, the details, it's weird. There's a lot of specifics, but there's not a lot of details. Like, what does a spiral-shaped tunnel mean? They continue down this tunnel, and they find unknown lettering. They find a language that they don't understand written on a stone slab. And they're like, that's weird. Let's keep on digging, though. That's not a warning sign. Let's keep on digging. No photos of the slab, by the way. Spoiler alert. There's no photos of that. They keep digging. They find a giant new slab. That one was the old slab. That was just an old rectangular slab with alien language on it. They find another slab, and this one was in the shape of like a concave lens. Okay? And it has a picture of what's described as a giant human on it. Now, based on just a picture drawn on a wall, I don't know if you could figure out whether or not it was a giant human or a regular-sized human. They don't have anyone for scale. They just see a giant picture of a human. But the story is that it was supposed to be a giant beyond this concave lens slab. This one, they move out of the way. They get a couple of brawny guards, military people, whatever, and they're like, and they move it out of the way, right? And at that moment, they are hit with a bright light. I shouldn't have moved that slab with that giant human. The alien warning must have said giant light behind this thing. People have said that the alien writing on the slab back there said there's some sort of biological entity in here that will kill all of humanity. And you're like, Jason, why'd you gloss over that? Well, it's because, I should have said that when I talked about the slab, but the reason why is that nobody knows what it says. A lot of people are putting their own things on what supposedly was in this hole. Anyway, so they move the giant slab. They get hit with a big beam of light. They see a tunnel. Now they see like another clear tunnel that they can walk down. And one of the guys goes, "Oh, clear sailing, right? We can walk down this tunnel." He walks down the tunnel and he's pushed back by an invisible force. So he tries to walk down the tunnel again. He's pushed back by an invisible force. He's like, third time's a charm, right? He's looking back at the other military guys. They're like, don't do it, bro. Don't do it. He walks again down the tunnel, pushed back by an invisible force. So at this point, the Bulgarian Ministry of Defense calls up Baba Vanga. Now, Baba Vanga is probably a pretty famous name for people who follow paranormal stuff. And on YouTube, Mircea actually requested that I do a story on Baba Vanga. Now, I'm familiar with Baba Vanga. The name pops up quite often in paranormal research. I'm going to do a brief overview on her. She was a Bulgarian mystic, clairvoyant, soothsayer. She could see in the future. She was a healer, things like that. She's actually really controversial in the paranormal world because we see a lot of prophecies attributed to her, but she wrote nothing down. So people say she predicted 9/11, she predicted the Kursk submarine, that Russian submarine that sank to the ground, she predicted all this stuff. She never wrote anything down, and her family members have actually said she never predicted 9/11. She never predicted World War III. A lot of the prophecies we see come from Baba Vanga are fake. And since she didn't write anything down, it can never be cross-referenced. So she was really if she was psychic, she was a personal psychic. You would come to her, she would tell you something. But when you see stuff online saying she predicted this, she predicted that, no, she didn't. People would come visit her, she would talk to them, stuff like that, but she wrote nothing down. She made no predictions like Nostradamus, where she was saying, this is what's going to happen 1,000 years from now and all that stuff. So it's really hard to take anything credible that she says, but she's such a recognizable name that she gets put into lore all the time, and she pops up in this story. Apparently, the Bulgarian Minister of Defense went to Baba Vanga and said, this is what happened. We walked past the slab. It had this stuff on it saying that there's some sort of biological entity in here that is bad for us. It'll kill humanity. We moved a concave slab, got hit with a beam of light, tried to walk down the hallway, got, repelled. And she goes, yeah, I can see into the future. I knew all that stuff was going to happen before you even did it. Okay? Don't waste my time. Don't waste your time. Don't waste my time. I'm a very, very important psychic. And I saw the future, and I knew you were going to waste my time. So this conversation I already had in my head. You pissing me off. Shut up. Okay. She puts her finger on their lips. Shh. Okay, be quiet. I'm going to tell you what's down that tunnel. Down that tunnel is a skeleton. A giant skeleton. And they're like, well, that explains the giant picture. And she's like, please just shut up for a second. Don't interrupt me. That giant skeleton is the first human. The proto-human. She turns around now. She has this huge PowerPoint display ready for the generals in the military defense. She goes, look at slide number 1. This is the proto-human. This is the first human. It's neither man nor woman. It's both and neither. And it exists in this cave system. And, listen to me, you cannot disturb this. It actually could be the end of humanity if you do. She shuts off her laser pointer, and they're like, fascinating. And she goes, I knew you'd say that. Now, there's actually a story out there that she gave even more detail about this proto-human. That she had another slide ready in her PowerPoint. She goes, click. The proto-human is actually from another planet. You see? Another planet. You see, what is in the proto-human is actually the DNA that was used to create the human race. That's why it's both man nor woman. So it's both human and alien. It's the beginning of everything, and it proves that we originated from another planet. And it's being guarded by those sorts of forces. Aliens, UFOs, things like that. So don't open up this tunnel anymore. Don't try to get down there. It will end badly for you and possibly all of us. So I've seen the most common version of the story is Baba Vanga just saying, it's a skeleton that's both man and woman. Now leave. And then there's versions that are more detailed where she's basically like, no, it's from an alien planet, stuff like that. But anyways, either way, the Ministry of Defense leaves Baba Vanga's hut, and they're like, okay, we're not going to do that anymore. And actually, one of the remote viewers supposedly quit after hearing this information, which again lends credence to my theory that only one of them was real. The other 2 people just wanted a paycheck. So after that whole story, the Ministry of Defense seals the hole with concrete and disappears. And one more, according to legend, this is a quote from Wikipedia. I'm going to read it in full, because it says a lot about the topic we're covering. Quote, the findings of a 2007 BTV is Bulgarian television. I don't know why I find that hilarious. I mean, there's MTV, that's cool. BTV? Anyways, quote, the findings of a 2007 BTV documentary on the Tsarichina project revealed that most of the military documents surrounding the event had disappeared from government archives or had since been destroyed. Citation needed. And that sums up the whole story. The whole story should basically have every article should end with citation needed. We're really going off a lot of rumors with this story. There is an addition to the story. So the tunnel ended in 1992. The digging ended in 1992. In 1993, apparently, a group of students from the University of Sofia go there. Sofia, that's a local university. They see UFOs. They see poltergeist. Weird combination. They see a pumpkin-shaped light floating around. And to cap it all off, tell me if this isn't spooky. Tell me if this doesn't send chills up your spine. The researchers start a campfire one night. They leave it unattended. They leave the campfire unattended for 4 minutes, apparently. camp catches on fire. Campsite catches on fire. And the article I got that from was saying, isn't it weird that the camp caught on fire, but none of the trees around it caught on fire? Could it possibly be the aliens warding them off? And I'm thinking, no, it's just not knowing how to use a fire. It's not knowing basic fire safety. If aliens are responsible because you don't know how to, that you shouldn't leave a fire unattended, don't leave fires unattended in the wilderness. Don't do that. That's not aliens. But anyway, so this is called this story is known as, this location is known as Bulgaria's Area 51. Come on. It's a hole in the ground covered in concrete. If that's your Area 51, if that's your most notable place as far as paranormal goes, as a hole in the ground, that may not even be there. It may just be a patch of concrete. Oh, Bulgaria. I don't know what to do with you guys. I'm sure you guys are a decent country, but come on. It's a hole in the ground, Area 51. But despite all of that, despite all of my misgivings about the story, I think it's interesting to think that some people went digging for gold and instead reached an impassable hallway that may have contained the first human protected behind it. But what's even more interesting is if they never got the inkling that there was any treasure down there, they never got a hint from a remote viewer that there was something down there, they never would have went down there in the first place. And that story of that skeleton would have never been revealed to the world because no one would have ever had a reason to start digging in the first place. It makes you wonder how many other lost chambers could be right beneath our feet right now when we walk about our daily lives. But do these caves also have some sort of defense system? They were never supposed to be discovered in the first place. But if they were, there were fail-safes set up. First, things that would warn you from going further, and then things that would actively repel you from going forward. But like any fail-safe, they too can fail. And it makes me wonder, what if no one went digging for this treasure? That this skeleton, protected by all of these measures, just sat there in the dark. But then an earthquake comes and splits the earth open. No one saw the tablet. No one was repelled by the force. Just one day, the people of Tsarichina fall ill. A disease begins to spread across the country of Bulgaria. Within weeks, it's ravaged Europe. Within months, humanity has fallen. I don't know how many earthquakes happen in Bulgaria. I don't know how many hidden chambers with deadly secrets exist under the planet's surface. But all it takes is a combination of one bad natural event, one hidden time bomb, and these stories are no longer myths or mysteries. These stories are the end of humanity. There could be ticking time bombs all over, right underneath our feet. And it's only a matter of time until one of these cursed objects gets loose. DeadRabbitRadio@gmail.com is going to be our email address. You can also hit us up at Facebook.com/DeadRabbitRadio. Twitter is @DeadRabbitRadio. Dead Rabbit Radio is the daily paranormal conspiracy and true crime podcast. You don't have to listen to it every day, but I'm glad you listened to it today. Have a great one, guys.